2014. Alex is going to be talking about Rene Descartes, who died in the mid 17th century, 1650, I think. 130 years before the French Revolution, but after the English Reformation. And go ahead, Alex.
Thank you, Ethan. So I guess everybody has heard about Rene Descartes, right? Yes, okay. And his famous dictum, I think, therefore I am. In Latin, cogito ergo sum. This speech is going to be about how Descartes tried to find the grounds for certain knowledge. Before that, shortly, let's just say that he was born in 1596 in France. He was a very developed intellectual, scientist, mathematician, and philosopher. Unfortunately, he died relatively young of pneumonia, which he got in Sweden, where he was teaching the Queen Christina. Descartes was probably a real intellectual. He wanted to stay in bed late, so he would go out after 12. But Queen Christina wanted him to wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning and have the classes at that time in the cold Sweden. And that's how he got sick and died. Yes. Well, anyway, Descartes put one question. How do we know that we know something, that we know certain truth? What was before Descartes in science and philosophy was ruling of Aristotelian science. Aristotle, the ancient Greek philosopher. Through the Middle Ages, the Thomas Aquinas and scholastic philosophers, Aristotle became a established figure in science and philosophy. And anybody who dared to say anything against Aristotle would get punished. Yes, and even by death, probably. Well, but at that time, people started slowly to doubt the truth that was passed from Aristotle. And Descartes also did the same. Before him, it was believed that the true knowledge comes from our senses, that there is nothing in our mind that hasn't been in the senses. This, maybe 40 years after Descartes' death, John Locke called it a tabula rasa, that in our mind we get born with an empty board which is written by our experience. Descartes felt that there is something wrong here. So, I will present 3 big steps, according to my understanding. Imagine the 3 steps as a triangle. You can imagine a triangle, no matter what kind of triangle you can imagine. Imagine your own triangle. Every triangle is the same in the way that it has 3 angles. So these 3 angles are the 3 steps. And why is it triangle? Because it's coming from the first to the second to the third and then back to the first step. The first angle of the triangle, the first step is Descartes doubting the knowledge that comes from our senses. Then he goes to the second step to prove that God exists, to prove that I exist. From this step he goes to the third one to prove that God exists, and then goes back to the first where he can prove that our senses are not lying to us, that the outside world exists. So let me ask you a question first. How do you know that this table exists, for example? Who can answer? Easy.
I can touch it.
Good. Any other answer? Can you see? Okay. Can you hear it?
We can use our senses.
Yes, so we use our senses. Well, Descartes said, okay, let's stop here. We use our senses, but maybe how are we sure that our senses are not lying to us? Or let's say, how are we not sure that we are not dreaming? Because when we dream, when we sleep and dream, we also have some sensual experience. We also see objects, see people, tables, etc. And how do I know that now I'm not dreaming? Maybe I'm dreaming now. So we are not sure about whether our senses are not just presenting us with some ideas that actually do not exist. They are only in our mind. So here he created a methodological doubt. So he said, okay, let's first doubt and say that our senses are not certain. Like in a way that maybe there is some higher or more perfect creature, like an evil demon that will deceive us and present us objects, or maybe interferes into our senses and says like, now you see a table, now you hear the bag there rolling, now you smell the flowers, now you feel the heat. Maybe this evil demon is lying. So, in the first step, Descartes says, let's put a doubt here, and we'll come back there later. It's in a way like in the common sense thinking, if you suddenly a person appears in front of you, and a few seconds disappears again, what will you think in the first moment? If you think that you are not crazy, the first thing you will think is that was a ghost, right? Because people don't do that. But Descartes might say, maybe that was the evil demon who deceives our senses. He just made this person appear and disappear in front of us just to deceive us. Okay, so we're going to the second step, and Descartes says, what is the thing that I will be sure about? I'm doubting about what my senses are presenting to my mind. I'm thinking that I might be deceived, or I'm even deceived. But when I'm deceived, when I'm doubting, I'm thinking all the time. So there must be something or someone who is deceived, someone who is doubting. And this someone is who else if not I? Because only I know about my thinking and my doubting. So if I think, that shows that actually I exist. Now this may be often wrongly understood, like that the thinking brings the existence. Like, for example, the table doesn't think, so the table doesn't exist. This is not the point what Descartes tried to say. He tries to say that the thinking is the proof for myself to have that I exist. Because if I were to deceive by someone, if I were to feel something, even if this something is not real, there is something that feels it. Like earlier today, we were eating in the park our dinner, and we were bitten by mosquitoes. Were these mosquitoes real? We only sensed by our senses. But since I sensed something, and maybe I was deceived, maybe the evil demon sent some sensations that look like mosquito bites. But it's I who feel that. So I exist. And that's the proof, or Descartes' proof of my existence. I exist. Now, what is this I who exists? Is it the body that I have? Or at this stage it's even wrong to say the body I have, because it's not proven, because the body, we feel the body by our sensations. It's the same as with the outside world. We have a sensation of our body. So it's not the body, it's not the material body, it's something else that is thinking. And this thinking is a thing. He calls it he says, I am a thing that thinks. Well, let's say this thing can be called something different from the body. It's not a body. Then it must be something else than the body, which is not touchable, seeable, hearable, so not perceivable by senses. It's not divided in pieces like the body. It's something unique that is totally different from the body. Well, since we know this, our next step, or Descartes' next step, is to see whether God exists or not. And this is very important for his argument that follows after that. You can say that one cause, one effect has as much reality as its cause. Like, there is as much reality in the cause as in the effect. Well, I will give an example. If you're sitting next to fire, you can feel heat in some part of your body. So the fire is the cause, the heat is the effect. There is as much reality in the cause as in the effect. So if I feel the fire, if I feel the heat, this heat comes from the fire, which is also hot. And there must be the same, so there is the same reality, as much reality in the cause as in the effect. how is this related to the idea of God? God is an idea that we have. So we have ideas of many things. We can have idea of tables. We can have ideas of chairs, people who we see and talk to. But we have ideas only of finite substances. But the idea of God is an idea of infinite substance. And so we can only have one idea of infinite substance. Well, if I am a finite substance, how can I have an idea of infinite substance? I couldn't create it by myself. Well, maybe some other creature gave it to me. Maybe my parents gave this idea to me. But how could my parents have this idea? Because they were also finite. Maybe they got their idea from their parents. And we can go on and on and on until we come to the point that we can say we cannot go anywhere else and say that it must be the infinite substance itself that gave the idea of this infinite substance. And this is Descartes' proof of the existence of God. That the cause of the idea has as much as reality as in the effect. And if we have the idea of infinite substance, then this must exist. This is the proof of God's existence. How do we have this idea of God? He says it's coming with our getting or coming out on this world. We have it innate, this idea of God. God imprints this idea to us. So now we have completed two steps. We are sure about my existence, which is a thinking thing. It's not a material body. We are sure about God's existence, according to Descartes' arguments. Right? So now we have to see whether God can deceive us. Because at the beginning, Descartes mentions that we might be deceived by some evil demon. Well, we have an idea of God. We imagine God as a perfect, omnipotent, powerful, infinite. So if He deceives us, will it be possible? Because it's the most powerful substance. It will be a kind of lack, a kind of malfunction if God will deceive us. So he believes that God cannot deceive us, and this way we can be sure about the knowledge that we get from outside world. We are going to the third step, the third angle of the triangle, and Descartes says, okay, we can be sure about mathematical and geometrical ideas. Like if we have, say, triangle, his examples with triangles were very, he was fond of these examples. Triangle is a body with three angles, and the sum of the three angles is equal to the sum of two how do you say this? Forgot it.
Angles?
Square angles.
Yeah, square.
Okay. Whether they exist or not, there might be not even a single triangle in the world, but a triangle as such must exist as an idea, as a mathematical idea. It's possible to exist. And from this, we say that God's essence is to exist. While we have the idea of the triangle, and the triangle must not exist, but we can perceive objects in a triangular form. Here we have tables in a square form, which is similar example. So the essence of God, because God is an infinite substance, so the essence of God is to exist. Since He exists, He must be something, as a perfect being, something that will make sure that we don't get deceived when we are using our senses. Of course, as long as we are healthy, we are not insane or sick or something. By this way, Descartes wants to say that if God cannot deceive us, then we can trust our senses. In short, we can see when we see this table, we know it's true, because we are sure that God will not deceive us. And at this moment, I am sane, so I know that this table exists. But all this knowledge originally doesn't come from our senses. It comes from the first step that I exist, through the second step that God exists. To consider myself, as Descartes would say, because at the beginning Descartes proved that I am a thinking thing, which is equal to what we can call soul, which is different from material body. Well, the question is about how about the body? The body that I say that it's my body, which I relate it as my body. It is the same as with the external things. So my body also exists because the senses are in my body. They cannot be somewhere else. They cannot be, I'm a thinking thing. As a thinking thing cannot have senses, only the body can have senses. The senses that come from the body are somehow connected to I as a thinking thing, the soul. And here we come to the big distinction between the soul and the body that Descartes makes. The body is an extended thing and can be divided into parts. Like if I cut off a part of my body, I can still be what I am and say this is my body. But the soul cannot be divided because it is not an extended thing. It's nothing that can be divided into parts. This distinction is very, I would say, very famous because later it made a lot of discussion about it. There was this Queen Elizabeth of Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia, and she asked him, okay, if I am the body and soul, but they are totally different and they cannot have contact with how is it possible that the soul is in the body? Why doesn't the soul exist outside the body? So I'm just a thinking thing without the body. This problem Descartes didn't have any answer about this. Later he said, okay, maybe it's this pineal gland in our brain, behind the brain. I think the scientists still are trying today to find proofs if our body and our soul are connected in some way. The purpose of Descartes was to create, to find out a certain knowledge, to create a base for science, which he, in a way, he did. We can see that, for example, in the medicine, we have physician who deals with our body. We have psychiatrist who deals with our soul. But we don't have a doctor who deals with both our body and our soul. This difference maybe is too superficial, but I'm not saying that Descartes was saying that we should divide the medicine in this way, because Descartes himself also recognized that the stress can influence our body. So the soul, the condition of the soul can influence our body. And we all know that the body sometimes can influence the condition of our soul. Okay, I will not go too far. He created a method which, for a scientific method, famous four steps of method for science. And I will read them now. They're short. The first was never to accept anything as true that I did not know to be evidently so. That is to say, carefully to avoid precipitancy and prejudice, and to include in my judgments nothing more than what presented itself so clearly and so distinctly to my mind that I might have no occasion to place it in doubt. So this might remind us of the first step, like methodological doubt. We first doubt that everything is really true as we think, and go to the next step. And then the second, to divide each of the difficulties that I was examining into as many parts as might be possible and necessary in order best to solve it. So this is the so-called analytical method. We divide the problem in small parts. The third, to conduct my thoughts in an orderly way, beginning with the simplest objects and the easiest to know, in order to climb gradually, as by degrees, as far as the knowledge of the most complex, and even supposing some order among those objects which do not precede each other naturally. So this is the synthetic method. We come from small pieces, and then gradually we go to the whole picture. And the last, everywhere, to make such complete enumerations and such general reviews that I would be sure to have omitted nothing. Okay, then I will stop here, and if you have any questions, you are free to ask.
All right, thank you, Alex. Who'd like to start? Guess it's me again. Only got 4 here. Let's see. I think this goes to what you were just talking about a second ago, a minute ago. What of Descartes' ideas still carry with us today? I've heard it as the idea of the relationship between people and the substance, or between people of substance and God, or is it body and soul? Do I have that a bit wrong?
The people?
Yeah, I mean, I was listening to the John Searle interview with, I can't remember his name right now. They were saying the most important thing that we still carry with us today from, the reason that we might still be considered, like everything after Descartes can be considered in a group, and everything before Descartes is considered in a group, and what we still carry with from Descartes is that relationship of the difference between body and soul.
Yeah, I guess so. Yes.
Because, and how does that, can you talk about how that relates to modernity and postmodernity?
Well, okay, I already mentioned something about the medicine. I guess this influences in a way that we want to clearly separate things, and we sometimes make clear distinction between what is material and what is, let's say, spiritual. But it might be said that this comes from Descartes, because he so clearly wanted to distinguish between body and soul. So now even today, like sometimes we have to choose. Like we can say that it's just the same and one thing. No, they would argue about it and say we clearly know what is body and we clearly know what is soul. Like if you take this table and say this is a material thing, extend it, we can divide it, but there is no soul in it. Well, okay, we are not sure about it. Probably today there will be some people who would argue that there is a soul in the table, but the arguments must be very difficult. Maybe I don't know things. And as for the modernity, yeah, this is the Descartes was called father of the modernity. So he's the initiator of the modern philosophy, but he's also initiator of the modern society. Virtually all the aspects of modern society we have probably come from Descartes. I don't think I can go into details about. Maybe we can imagine about that. The postmodernity probably is something that goes beyond modernity. Maybe tries to go back before the modernity, or find some new ways to how to deal with these problems of modernity. Let's say in some societies we have physicians who are at the same time spiritualists. So it's not like in Western medicine that the physician is just a physician. The psychiatrist is just a psychiatrist. And in some societies, or even maybe in Chinese medicine is more holistic than the Western medicine. It's more like less modern, let's say, than Western medicine, because the Chinese doctor will ask you questions about your life, about your past, about your parents, and everything has to do something with your physical illness, with the illness of your body. Okay, can I answer it?
Yeah. Thanks. Other questions?
I think I can. Okay, so Eckhart Tolle, who I study, said that Descartes made his famous statement, proof they exist, which is I think, therefore I am. And Eckhart Tolle said that's actually the most famous error, because he said that the thinking mind actually isn't the amness of being, and that you are the one that watches the mind is the one that is, and the one that the mind is actually unfortunately in control, but it's the egoic mind that is the illness, as opposed to the one that watches, which is the beingness, the amness. And let's see, the mind is overwritten by past conditioning or future expectations, and it's dominating and keeping us not in the present moment, whereas the being behind is able to go into the present, but it can't because the mind is interfering with that, and the mind is actually interfering with the amness of being. What do you think?
So who's watching the mind?
The being that's really you.
Is watching the mind.
Yeah, the mind is a tool. And
So the being that watches the mind doesn't exist according to Eckhart Tolle?
The being that watches the mind is existing, and it's truly existing.
Okay.
Whereas the mind is actually corrupting you. It's actually a destructive energy, unless it's being used by the mind.
Why is he wrong, Descartes? I don't get it.
Because thinking destroys amness. So if he says, "I think, therefore I am," that's not, because a fish still is, and a bird that's flying around is, but it's not doing complicated math problems or anything like that. It's not thinking, "Oh, I can feel the wind, therefore my senses." He's just a being. And a fish doesn't ask doesn't say, "Oh, this is water I'm swimming in." But it still is. It's still.
But why would thinking destroy the amness? I don't get this.
Why would thinking destroy what?
Amness.
It actually just drives it in corruptive directions. It's covering the present moment.
Okay.
It's hiding the present.
But I don't see any difficulty here, because the thinking cannot destroy the amness, because for Descartes, thinking proves the existence. And I am the one who asks about my existence. Fish don't ask about their existence. They cannot give answers.
But they still are.
Yes.
But isn't cognito ergo sum not just thinking? It's also experiencing and feeling all of the senses.
Because it's like when you walk or you eat, you know that you eat, you think that you eat, so it's the same. When you doubt, when you say I'm not thinking, you are actually thinking at the same time, and you confirm your existence.
But then the cat doesn't need to confirm it. It's not thinking, "Oh, I'm eating now," but it's still there.
Cat doesn't ask philosophical questions.
Yeah, but the cat is
Cat
still
yeah, but cat
is. The cat still is.
yeah, who said that they're not? They can never say that they don't exist.
He's just saying man exists.
No.
And he has proof that man exists because man thinks.
No, he says I exist. He doesn't know